So, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce Amit Narayan. He is a PhD from Berkeley, like I am. He spent time at Stanford, like I do now, and he was a research director here and created a really exciting program around grids. So when I joined the university, I met him. And from there, he did a journey of starting a company for electricity grid. He was a successful entrepreneur before in the IT industry, and so I thought it would be a really interesting experience to have him here, share a little bit of his journey, the challenges and opportunities in the electricity sector, and what do we need to do. So maybe, Amit, you could start telling us a little bit about your self and your company, AutoGrid.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here. It's exciting to be with all of you. As Ram mentioned, I started my journey in the sustainability energy space right at Stanford. Before I did that, I was in the semiconductor business. When the first iPhone came out, 8 of the 10 chips that were done in that iPhone were done using the software that my team had written. But if any of you has worked in semiconductor space, you know that it's like being on a treadmill. You have to run twice as fast every year just to stay at the same place. So after having done that for 15 plus years, I was looking for the next big area where I could have a meaningful impact. And it seemed that climate change was a need that not a lot of people were addressing at that time. So I was very fortunate that around that time, Stanford had made a big commitment to the space with the Precourt Energy Institute and the Tomcat Center. And for me, the big aha moment was that I could use some of the same math and physics that we were using in optimizing semiconductor chips and start looking at optimizing the grid, because it turns out the laws of physics don't change. And if any of you are electrical engineers, you might have come across something called the Kirchhoff's laws, and they actually work the same way, whether you have a tiny chip where signals are running very fast, or you have a very large system. And we were already dealing with billions of transmission lines as part of optimization of semiconductor. So it was a little bit of a crazy idea, but Stanford is, I guess, the ideal place to explore these crazy ideas. And they gave me the opportunity to come here and explore this. Very early on, I was the first sort of funded project by the Tomcat Center, and Ram joined shortly after. We collaborated. And then that led to creation of my company, which is called AutoGrid. One of the key things that we sort of realized back then was one of the central problems, and I'm sure all of you have heard this if you didn't already know, is in decarbonizing, is to see how we can get renewables onto the grid. And renewables are very intermittent, which means that the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine in the night. So how do you keep the system stable? And we felt that the role of software, especially intelligent software driven by AI, which uses all the data that was beginning to get generated through various connected devices like smart meters and smart thermostats and EVs and so on, would be very critical in our ability to run the grid in newer ways. So that's what our company started doing. And we were fortunate that the market was ready, receptive for something like this. Department of Energy had just started. They had created an advanced research projects agency at that time, which decided to fund us. And so, I mean, it took us a while, but over the years, we have grown quite a bit. We are now in 17 countries. We are managing about 7,000 megawatts of assets on our platform, which is like roughly around 7 nuclear plants, if you want to just do a back of the envelope. And very recently, 2 months ago, we were acquired by a larger company, Schneider Electric. So we are a subsidiary of Schneider now.
And Amit, in your experience, what is the biggest challenge to do innovations in the electricity sector?
Yeah, I think in general, clean tech is not the easiest of the areas to be doing a startup in, because the time horizons are long. A lot of, I'm sure you have heard a lot about product market fit. There is also an element of product policy fit here. Like the electricity sector has not really changed that much in the last 100 years. And a lot of the business models are still regulated, especially outside of US and even within US. So they don't typically buy cheaper, better, faster. You have to make complex business cases, and utility accounting is a tough thing. So I think dealing with that is not easy. And so it's a bit of a marathon. And everybody that you bring around the table, even if as a founder you're ready for that marathon, you need to make sure that all the stakeholders that you're dealing with, whether these are your co-founders or other employees, they realize that this is not going to be an instant gratification. You want to how to keep them motivated over a long period of time, and that obviously comes from attachment to the mission and passion towards it. And also the investors, because the investors, a lot of them still, especially the venture investors, they have 10-year time horizons on their fund. If you get money 4 or 5 years into the life of a fund, then in 5 years they need to figure out how to deal with end of fund dynamics, and people move around. So keeping everybody aligned is a pretty significant challenge, I think. And that creates some opportunities for investors who are looking at this from a slightly longer time frame and horizon perspective as well.
And what are some of the areas you feel there is opportunities currently?
Well, I think this is the most exciting time to be in this space. The government in US just passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which is just another name for the largest climate change bill in the history of the United States. Europe is doing the same thing. Whether you believe in climate or you think of this from an energy security perspective, I think we need to move away from fossil fuel into clean energy. So I think pretty much every sector of this is ripe for innovation, and there is tremendous amount of activity already going on. A few areas that right away come to my mind, this whole electrification trend, whether it's electrification of whole homes or transportation, I think it's a mega trend. If you ask me, it's the only way that we know today, really, to get decarbonization done at scale. We convert more uses of energy to electricity, and then we use renewable electricity to generate that power. And so in one area in particular that I'm extremely bullish is around electric vehicles, because I think that really creates an opportunity to think about many business models in fundamentally new ways. Typically when you look at transportation, you look at one use case, and then when you look at grid, that's a completely separate use case. But now in California, we just deployed more than 1 million electric vehicles, and these are actually batteries on wheels. So if you can harness the battery in these vehicles, you can back up the entire grid. I don't know how many of you were following the emergency that we had last week in California. The governor was on the television asking people to conserve. And we just extended the nuclear plant. I think it's going to cost somewhere around $6 billion to solve a problem that happens for roughly 40 to 60 hours during the year. So if we can tap this unused capacity from the batteries that are in electric vehicles, we can replace tons of fossil fuel plants. We can stabilize and back up the entire grid. And I think there are going to be a lot of new ideas and new companies specifically around the interaction of EVs with the grid and how that whole ecosystem can work.
And in terms of one of the things that we hear a lot about that you touched a little bit there in your presentation was when you're innovating in this space, you have to have patience and there's this long term because of the misalignment, et cetera. What does that mean in terms of the kind of teams that you need to recruit for your company?
Yeah, that's a great question. We were at the intersection of software, like things that typical Silicon Valley companies would do, AI, big data, IoT, things like that, and energy. So I think it's a very exciting space. We were looking for people who would come from the tech domain, even if they didn't know as much about energy. We thought that we can teach them about energy. My own background was not in energy. I came from semiconductors. I had about 2,000 people in my LinkedIn when I started the company, and there was absolutely zero from a utility. Over time, I was able to build the network and so on. But what I think the defining characteristic for people who were successful in our company and who were able to endure the journey was just the passion around decarbonization. If they identified with the problem, maybe before they joined, they didn't quite realize how big a challenge it was for humanity, but somewhere along the way, they started identifying with the cause. Then it became a mission for them. And we have a lot of people who were with us for the whole journey, like 8, 9, 10 years, actually. We had very low attrition. On the other hand, people who came in thinking that they are going to make a quick buck, it's a big market, it's going to be $1 trillion, which is all true, but it is not an instant gratification. It takes some persistence and resilience to be part of that journey. So I think that probably is the number one thing that we have found to work. And then we look for those signs as we interview and bring new people on board. And that's true for investors as well, by the way. I think a lot of investors came into this clean tech space thinking that it's like the next big thing, and then they lost the patience and they pivoted out. And that is very disruptive for the companies as well, right? If the investors start losing confidence, they will ask for unnatural things in terms of exit or whatever. So I think commitment to the cause is really, I think, critical here. It's probably critical in all the startups, but I feel that for this space, it is the most.
And one last question before opening up for others to ask questions. If somebody wants to make the journey into this space like you did, what are the kind of things they need to learn about, or what is really critical?
I will just repeat myself. I don't think there is any specific thing. I didn't know anything about the space. There are places like Stanford which are very welcoming, right? Here you just have to raise your hand and there will be 50 people who will stand behind you to make you successful. It's like the most amazing place on planet. And that's, I think, very true. And it's really just trying to identify with the cause and see how what you know, which over your career, how you can connect some of those dots forward-looking, right? In my case, I was dealing with very complex systems, optimizing them at scale, and I was able to connect the dots that you need the same type of optimization in this space. So I think there's no specific path. I think the desire comes before any specific skill set, and if there is desire, then the skill set will follow, actually.
Very good. So maybe just to open up for questions that the audience may have, and then in case you don't have, I have a few other questions too for Amit. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Bruce?
So patience is a rare commodity here in Silicon Valley. How do you cultivate a team? This picks up what Ram was saying. How do you recruit a team that can calibrate patience around goals? And how do you blend culture, picking up on the last few presentations? How do you create a diversity while having a common sense of purpose through that time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've never thought about it, and I don't know if there's a specific formula for that. It's something that happens. It's almost a self-selecting type of a situation. People who don't have it will move away, and the people who are left are generally committed. It's very difficult environment to be in a startup where it's like you're sitting in a casino and everybody else's vending machine is paying and yours is not paying, right? So it comes from within, and I think you have to celebrate every little win that you get along the way. I mean, one of the things that we were very focused on was that if we get a customer, we would want to do everything to make this customer successful. Because this is such a risk-averse industry. Like my first customer I spoke with in City of Palo Alto Utilities, and the guy said that, oh, I wake up in the morning and I look at the newspaper, and if my name is not in this newspaper, I'm very happy. So, because it can only be bad news, right? So you're dealing with a very risk-averse customer, and I always felt this way, that if somebody is sticking their neck out and giving you an opportunity to work on a problem, they are taking a tremendous risk. And if we are not able to deliver on the expectations, then not only are we missing out on an opportunity that we have, we are letting this person down, and we are actually probably going to slow the whole industry down because there are enough naysayers as is. And now if you try something and you fail, then people will say, well, we told you so, it was never possible, right? So I think that sense of commitment was a very big thing, and then, we did a lot of things which were the first in the space, nobody had done before, many people thought it can't be done, and just celebrating that and feeling the sense of accomplishment, the sense of purpose, I think that's what we ended up doing.
Any other questions? There's a question back there.
Okay, so I have two quick questions. One, I think you mentioned something about nuclear. Are they going to solve the 40 to 60 hour energy problem with nuclear? And then I heard something about fission reactors today. Do those exist?
So the reason I mentioned nuclear, and I do think that nuclear has an important role to play in the overall stack. No energy source is perfect, but the fact that nuclear does have a huge advantage in terms of carbon, I think makes it attractive, and we have to deal with some of the other things in there. But I think to solve the problem specifically for 60 hours, I don't think nuclear is necessarily the most cost-effective or best alternative. And the reason I mentioned this was that there is already a lot of unused capacity. I used the example of Airbnb. Like before Airbnb came out, nobody thought that they would be able to use their spare room for providing accommodation, or Uber, where you can drive the car. So like when you have these batteries in the car in the garage, and now you can rent it back to the grid, you are actually doing what we have already seen in other domains, except that here you don't have to bring a stranger in your home. You don't have to drive your battery from the garage. It's sitting there. It's like a self-driving version of Uber is providing power to the grid when the grid most needs it. And there's plenty of this spare capacity in the form of smart thermostats, water heaters, EVs, batteries, you name it, like building management system. You can change 1 or 2 degrees on this building, and you can save hundreds of kilowatts, basically. And that may not sound that much, but when you aggregate it over entire California, that's like tens of gigawatts of capacity, basically, right? So, and it's all possible now for the first time because of software. In the past, you couldn't do it because this would be a very manual process. There will be issues around comfort and so on. But now everything is connected, and intelligence can work in the background to bring this up. So long story short, I do think nuclear plays a role, but I think that there are a lot of other degrees of freedom that we have in the system that we haven't tapped into, and policy should be developed to encourage the use of those things, and that will be win-win. That will actually create a positive catalyst. That will be a self-reinforcing cycle. The more we can use batteries or EVs for providing grid support, not only do we make the grid cleaner and more resilient, we actually drive the adoption of these technologies, and then that creates a flywheel effect for more deployment as well. And on the fusion, I'm not an expert. I see some of the same articles. I wish them all the best. I hope that it will be a successful source of energy.
Very good. Any last questions? Okay. If not, thank you so much, Amit, and looking forward to your next adventure here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.